What's up, everybody? Welcome to CFP Talks. My name is Jonas, and with me is Mr. Raman Singh. Raman, what's going on, man?
I'm feeling great. I mean, come on, look at the background.
Setup is tight.
I
Tight.
actually use Chat GPT to help me with my background. So
Did
shout out
you?
to Chat GPT, I'll say that.
Shout out to
Shout out to Chat GPT. So Joe, what are we talking about today, man? I'm excited. I feel like it's been a minute. So what's going on? What's on the plate?
Let's talk a little bit about some of the nuts and bolts of the exam. Um, when you and I were teaching our previous class, we kind of noticed that a lot of students were coming in not as prepared on investment planning as we necessarily anticipated them to be.
Yeah.
And specifically, and I don't know, I thought we would have more students taking the seven. It's clearly, obviously, on the RIA side, it's not a requirement. So, we've designed some things inside of class to help them break down some of those things. And one of the things that I think a lot of people were struggling with was, how do I break down mutual funds and ETFs and some of the differences between them? Because it seems like it's a focus point for the board, and understandably so. It is a big question in financial planning. Do we continue going down the road of mutual funds because it's still dominant inside of 401ks? Or do we start integrating and just making everything ETFs? And when do we use each?
I think what you're talking about is definitely one of the important parts when it comes to studying. And to your point, a lot of CFP students that we're seeing nowadays is they've never taken the seven before.
Yeah.
So when you skip the seven and you jump into the beast of this CFP exam, the only thing you know about mutual funds and ETFs or even index funds at that point is what you're learning at work.
Yeah.
But the CFP board obviously wants you to know more than what you know at work. So
Yeah.
I think that's a great topic, man. I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm all ears. I want to see what we got to talk about.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to put up a whiteboard on the screen.
Okay.
And what me and Raman are going to do for you guys today is we are going to make your lives fantastic. We're going to make it very easy. We're going to show you exactly how to break down these topics. So, Raman, you and I were talking about this before we put this up. So, I think step one is when you're breaking down these things, you got to know the fundamental features. And we're going to kind of work this stepwise and we're going to build this into three parts. What do you think in here if I'm a CFP student and I'm getting started?
Mhm.
Raman, give me the hard and fast. What do I need to know of these fundamental features and why do I need to know it?
Sure. I'd say first off, you just want to know the basics of it. How are funds versus ETFs? How are they bought and sold?
Okay,
Right.
great.
So that's keep it simple. Like, how are you buying a mutual fund? How are you buying an ETF? How are you selling a mutual fund? How are you buying an ETF and um the settlement, right? That's a big thing. Also, one of the most important things I'd say is understand the fees. The
Yes.
fees, the sales charges, the internal expenses, right? Another big factor I would say to think about is liquidity. Big thing, because as you know, at ETFs and funds, hey, comment below, guys. Tell us how the liquidity works on ETFs and mutual funds, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and then last but not least, when it comes to, believe it or not, when it's like a Series 7 topic is margin. Is what's marginable? What can you write options on? When it comes to mutual funds versus index funds versus ETFs, because you have to know those fundamental features. So that's what I gotta say. What about you, Joe?
No, I agree with that list wholeheartedly. I think this is, you got to know, and if you've never taken the seven and you have a friend who's taken the seven or a colleague who's taken the seven, go grab their Series 7 book and look at those charts that they have in a Series 7 book on these things, meaning know the difference that one is bought and sold directly with the institution, the mutual fund institution, as being which one is being bought and sold on an exchange. You got to know the fees. You got to know where an A fund, an A share is, where it be, because this is ultimately going to feed into steps 2 and 3. And the reason that we put it here is because this is your basis. So
Yep.
if you don't know these fundamental factors, it's going to be hard to understand the next step. So liquidity, you have to know the difference between exchange liquidity and liquidity with the actual investment manager. And then which of these can I write options? Can I buy options on? Can I buy it on margin? Can I do this inside of a margin? Can I short it? Oh, actually, I'm going to add that Ramen too as well.
Oh, sure.
Is which one of these
Oh,
can be shorted,
yeah.
right? Because this is ultimately, these are the types of things that ultimately lead into how we use this inside of portfolio management and the hedging of portfolios.
Yeah.
So I would say this is step one. I'm gonna say step two,
Yep.
or the second thing is then you got to understand the taxes.
Oh, okay. So how about this? You tell me, Joe, what are some things when it comes to taxes we sh students should be looking out for studying for taxes and fundamental
Yeah.
features with mutual funds and ETFs?
Once again, you're welcome for all these little nuggets of wisdom. But distributions,
Okay.
cap gains,
Yep. Yep. Well, that's a big one.
turnover.
Oh,
Okay.
yes. Yep.
So
Yep.
this
Yep.
is right. And you see this a lot on, it doesn't matter what provider you use, myself, Dalton, any provider, you're gonna see this. And this is not necessarily a top, but do you understand that a mutual fund may not necessarily go up or down? It can go sideways and you still have to pay taxes, and why that's the case. And I know you have a case study in this where, somebody had just bought a fund and then their taxes, and I kind of think that those are prime great CFP questions. It's something that we obviously integrate into our course. But
So, if you don't mind, Joe, I'd like to throw that question for the audience, and
yeah,
please feel free to comment here. But this is when I used to work with an advisor almost a decade ago. There was a client who bought about $1 million worth of mutual fund right around, like, let's say September, October time, and now we're talking about 2015, 2014 time period. So it's been a while. And then year end happened and the client received a 1099 and their portfolio did not grow, but they had to owe a lot of taxes. I'd like for you guys to comment and tell us why that client owed taxes.
yeah, that's a great question. So knock that down in the comments. Love to see some of your answers. We will respond obviously to all of those comments, but absolutely maddening for clients,
Yeah, they were pissed.
right? And I had a partner, like when I was at Smith Barney, I worked part of a group of 4 guys, and I was the youngest guy in the group. And I remember one of the partners going, and I remember having taken the Series 7 and thinking, "Oh, I know what's going on now." And he would always say, he's like, and we were doing quite a bit of mutual fund business. And he would always say, he's like, the worst thing about mutual funds is when the market goes sideways and they still got to pay taxes. When
Mm.
the market goes sideways and they still got to pay taxes. You as a CFP have to understand that and be aware of it and understand why or when this works. And obviously, this is going to be when you're comparing mutual funds and ETFs, why this is such an important part. What do you think the last part of this is?
Drum roll, please. Suitability. Suitability.
Suitability.
Yep.
Excellent. I would agree with that.
Yeah, man. I mean, we gotta know, right? Like when to choose. Here's the thing, guys. If you are given a question for a client situation and there's answer choices that says ABC mutual fund, ABC index fund, and ABC ETF, you have to know which one to pick and why. Even though they all sound the same, you have to know which one. That's why you gotta know when to choose which one. And then secondarily, Joe, you wanna answer that one?
The where you put it, what account you put these in.
Tax location.
Ooh, I
Tax
like that.
location, baby. Tax location.
Ta-
I
ta-
actually use that with my clients a lot, with my financial planning practice clients. It's not always about asset allocation, it's also about tax location. If you end up putting a specific type of investment in a wrong account, it could create a lot of problems.
That's right.
So
Right.
so tax location is one of the biggest things I'd say when it comes to suitability as well.
Yeah, and here's the thing is that when you're here, and again, if you're a CFP student and you're using this video to help break down your studying, don't skip the steps. Okay? Don't go, "Oop, I need to know suitability." The whole purpose of laying it out in this format for you is you're never going to get to this part if you don't know here.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know the basics of how something is bought and sold, you may miss the suitability piece completely. Because if you have a client that's telling you, I don't want to pay commissions, or you're trying to put this inside of a fee based type of account, or you're a fee only planner, you can have a one scenario, but with one detail being different, and it leads to different answers.
Yeah.
So this may, and I'm going to add one more part. I'm going to add a part E,
Sure.
and I'm going to put the types of funds,
Okay.
because you have to know the difference between something as simple as what an aggressive growth fund does as opposed to a growth, as
Hmm.
opposed to a value, as opposed to a core or a blend,
Yep.
the different capitalizations, where the sector fund is, how bond funds work. Because if you don't know this stuff, then you're not going to be able to really make heads or tails of this, which
Yep.
is the taxes. Like if I don't know the basics, I can't know the taxes. And if I don't know the basics and the taxes, it's very hard to make a recommendation.
100%. Man, Joe, honestly, I love how we broke this down. I really hope listeners and watchers out there they find value in it. And remember, the question is, there was a client, he bought a mutual fund in October or September, and the market was flat, his portfolio was flat, and he ended up had to owing taxes that year. Why did that happen? And please comment on that.
I can feel the anger from here.
I can feel
Like
the
I can
client was
feel.
pissed.
Oh
The
yeah,
client was
there. I
pissed.
mean, can you imagine just dumping 50 grand into a mutual fund in October, and then owing
Oh,
three?
it was a
Uh,
million
oh,
dollars and
even
a taxable brokerage account.
all right. And do you remember what the tax obligation was?
I think it was like around 20, $30,000 of taxes owed on that. Like it was pretty massive.
Welcome to American funds. Here's your tax bill.
Hey,
Like,
how did you know that?
I'm like, it's, and I feel like this is such a very common mistake that even advisors to this day still make, is not necessarily understanding that tax implication, because we all go in thinking that I'll only pay taxes on mutual funds when I sell the fund, not realizing that there's a lot of stuff that goes on in between from the buy to the end of the sale.
Yeah.
So, when you guys are breaking this down, make sure that you know each piece of this, and you can always come to Raman or myself for additional helps or concerns here. But this is a really organized, beautiful way of kind of breaking down this topic that will rear its head in a lot of different ways on this exam. So make sure that you understand this and break this down. And if you guys, as we said, if you have any questions, let us know. Ramen, any closing thoughts?
No, man. Just keep studying, keep pushing forward, and we're here to help.
All right, awesome. All right, guys, please make sure to like and subscribe to this channel, and we will see you guys on our next episode. Take it easy.